People are fascinated with stuff that our ancestors did. Ignore the fact that they died significantly younger than we do today. Our ancestors didn't use skincare products and they were perfectly fine. Okay, but they actually did. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the oldest skincare, arguably, honey. Archaeological records indicate honey being used in skincare formulations dating back to 4500 BC amongst ancient Egyptian nomadic tribes. There are also historical reports from the Renaissance period of honey being used for moisturizing the skin and for its antibacterial and wound healing properties. Not only does honey itself have a variety of compounds, which we'll talk about in today's video, that portend benefit directly for the skin, but it also can be used as a vehicle to apply other things onto the skin. And historically, that is one of the ways in which it has been used, to use powders of things that were thought to be helpful for healing of cuts and scrapes, ground up, added to honey, applied to the skin. Now, you don't have to scroll too long on the natural skincare side of TikTok to encounter a TikTok of somebody making some sort of DIY skincare concoction with a bunch of honey. And it's not complete BS. Honey has a variety of beneficial properties to it for the skin. And medicinally, currently, honey is of interest for wound healing. Honey contains a variety of antimicrobial compounds. It has antibacterial properties, so it helps cut down on bacterial colonization of wounds that can slow down healing and complicate the healing process. Honey also has anti-inflammatory compounds, antioxidants, so it can be beneficial for warding off oxidative stress that not only damages and slows down the healing process, but also, well, contributes to inflammatory skin reactions and the aging process in general. Honey contains tons of sugars. Sugars at that concentration are both hydrating for the skin, but they also help to prevent certain types of infections. One of the most important aspects of healing a wound, whether it be a cut, a scrape, a surgical wound, is care to keep the wound bed moist, hydrated, and free of contaminating microbes. Honey actually provides all of those things. It's hydrating, it's soothing, and it wards off microbial contamination. Covering a wound is a key aspect of healing cuts and scrapes effectively and reducing the risk of infection. Unfortunately, many types of wound dressings can adhere to the wound bed and be very painful to remove and end up disrupting the wound bed if proper measures are not taken to prevent that dressing from sticking to the wound. And honey can actually help cut down on a gauze dressing, for example, sticking to the wound bed. Compounds in honey promote new healthy blood vessel growth, which is really, really important for healing. Brings in nutrients and allows for new healthy skin to form what's called granulation tissue, a key aspect of wound healing. Honey has also been demonstrated to promote epithelialization of wounds, basically the covering up with new healthy skin of a wound defect. The antimicrobial properties of honey are useful for not only defending against bacterial infections, but also it has antifungal properties and antiviral. It is pretty comprehensive in the different types of infections that it might help to ward off. There are even some studies of honey looking at it for herpes viral skin infections, as well as candidal yeast infections of the skin. Candida yeast can often colonize areas of the skin where you have an impaired skin barrier, especially in the skin folds. You have moisture being trapped there, you have maceration, breaks down the skin barrier, and candidal yeast can come in and colonize, and you can get yeast infections of the skin. Check out my video on skin signs of a yeast infection. I go into more details there about the risk factors, such as a weakened immune system. But honey may help defend against that. There's also some research examining honey for treatment of Malassezia yeast-related skin issues. Now, Malassezia is a yeast that naturally lives on everyone's skin. It's part of our normal microbiome. You would not want to completely eradicate it, but it goes without saying that overabundance of Malassezia yeast and the inflammatory response against it plays a role in a variety of different skin conditions, such as dandruff, seborrheic dermatitis, tinea versicolor, pityrosporum folliculitis, aka fungal acne. And there is some evidence to suggest that honey can help tamper down the overabundance of Malassezia yeast that leads to these problems. compounds. There are fungal organisms known as dermatophytes that cause, well, ringworm. Honey may be helpful for healing of a ringworm. Now, I would never say it is a replacement for antifungal medications to treat ringworm, but it shows promise as an alternative or maybe playing a supporting role in the treatment of fungal skin infections. Honey has anti-irritant properties. It's soothing, it's anti-inflammatory. It's been investigated as a treatment for acne, likely because it's got antibacterial compounds, it's anti-inflammatory, and it helps with improving moisture content in the skin. These are things that end up boding well, actually, for acne, and may not be a direct treatment of acne, but may play, again, a supporting role in acne management when used in conjunction with perhaps standard of care acne treatments. I'm always cautioning you guys about a risk with putting anything on your skin, and that is contact dermatitis. It could be allergic, meaning your immune system does not like a particular ingredient in that product, or it could be an irritant, meaning the product is simply irritating to the skin. Honey has been shown to be helpful for contact dermatitis, likely because of its moisturizing properties and soothing compounds. Although it is definitely not without the potential for risks, albeit small, which we will get into towards the end of the video. Honey isn't just something that you might encounter in a medical therapy for treating wounds, ulcers, scrapes, cuts, possibly playing a supporting role in treating skin conditions, but surprise, surprise, if you've ever read the ingredients on skincare products, makeup products, even hair care products, you likely will encounter honey in many of these, the featured ingredient, or again, playing a supporting role in the ingredient lineup. Now, it doesn't take a cosmetic chemist to tell you that honey is pretty sticky. Smearing it on the skin or in the hair, a little tricky, a little difficult. So honey is rarely used at high concentrations, high percentages in skincare or cosmetic products, generally around the range of anywhere from 1 to 10%. Although higher percentages may be allowed with the addition of things like emulsifiers and oils, make it so that it's not as sticky. Honey has a variety of amino acids, which are naturally part of skin's moisture barrier. They are what are considered natural moisturizing factors. So replenishing that to skin's outermost layer can help not only with moisture retention, but also help with barrier integrity. Speaking of which, honey has a slightly acidic pH and may help support the acidic pH necessary to maintain good outermost barrier integrity. Not all honey is created equal. There's tremendous variation from different types of honey depending on the botanic source, depending on the flower that the honey came from. You're going to have different relative abundances in the sugars, the amino acids, the antioxidants, the antimicrobial compounds from different types of honey, and it might also be heavily influenced by how the honey was harvested and prepared. Acacia honey is produced from the flowers of the black locust and is commonly encountered in skincare and cosmetic products because it has a higher ratio, if you will, of fructose to glucose sugars. Fructose has better solubility, and because of this difference in the proportion of sugars in this particular honey, it's less likely to crystallize. That's a great property for an ingredient that's going to be used in skincare products. The last thing you want is for your moisturizer to have chunks of crystals in it. That is not ideal. We've all probably heard someone out there singing the praises of Manuka honey. I even have a video on my channel that I did in 2020 all about Manuka honey and its skin benefits. And you'll recall from that video that Manuka honey, which comes from Leptospermum scoparium, mouthful, is unique in that it has a particular antimicrobial compound, methylglyoxal. Methylglyoxal is produced in Manuka honey secondary to the conversion of dihydroxyacetone. Yes, the active ingredient in sunless tanner is naturally abundant in Manuka honey, and over time, while it's being stored, that dihydroxyacetone, through a non-enzymatic conversion, leads to the formation of methylglyoxal, an antimicrobial compound that is thought to be particularly helpful in treatment of, well, wounds and ulcers. It's interesting because Manuka honey, when it is freshly prepared, doesn't actually have much of this beneficial compound. It's only over time that dihydroxyacetone with storage leads to the formation of methylglyoxal. You also can get a lot of variation in the overall antioxidant content of different types of honeys. It's thought that the darker the honey, the more antioxidants and the more anti-inflammatory. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, honey is not without the possibility of harm. Not all things that are natural are necessarily safe or effective or necessarily free of risk. honey, while generally safe, generally well tolerated, and evidence-based as being effective for moisturizing the skin, for helping with wound healing, does offer some potentially unique risks. Honey can be contaminated with the spores of Clostridium botulinum. Yes, the same little critter that produces a toxin that we use to paralyze facial muscles to reduce wrinkles, but that particular toxin can also be, well, toxic. Honey can contain dormant endospores of this particular bacteria. That's why when you go into the grocery store, you buy honey, it'll say something along the lines of do not feed to an infant, because for an adult, trace amounts of those endospores are unlikely to lead to harm. But for an infant, more likely to potentially lead to harm. Also, honey that is enriched in something called propolis, as you guys know from my videos, well, that's a very moisturizing ingredient commonly found in like lip balms, for example. People can be allergic to it, and therefore, you know, it's a potential downfall of using honey over another wound healing great that I always recommend, plain petroleum jelly. You're not going to become allergic to petroleum jelly, but you possibly could become allergic to something in honey, just naturally found in honey. That being said, allergic contact dermatitis to honey is pretty uncommon. Getting back to the potential for dormant endospores of Clostridium botulinum. Now, when you're applying it to your skin, if you're applying it to a cut or a wound, you can get wound botulism. So herein comes something that's going to sound like, wait a minute, didn't you say this was BS? Yes, it is BS for the most part, except in certain circumstances, and that is, wait for it, medical grade honey. Medical grade honey is actually a legitimate category of honey. Y'all know on my videos, I'm always saying medical grade skincare is just marketing BS, and it is. There's no such thing as a medical grade antioxidant serum. There's no such thing as a medical grade vitamin C, a medical grade sunscreen. This is just marketing jargon. But medical grade can have true meaning, and here in the case of honey, it definitely does. Why? If you're going to be putting something on a patient who has a wound, say a diabetic ulcer, a cut, they have an impaired immune system, you don't want to risk the theoretical possibility of introducing wound botulism. So herein comes medical grade honey, which has been irradiated to destroy any potential contaminants. So much safer to use in the medical setting when treating diabetic ulcers, for example, wounds, etc. There's a bit of a trade-off there though, because the irradiation process likely compromises the integrity of some of the potential beneficial compounds. But when we're talking strictly for wound healing purposes, it does not compromise the benefits on wound healing. So it's still really useful, still really helpful, and also cost effective to treat wounds that way, but safer than just going to, say, the grocery store and getting food grade honey and putting it on a wound. You can actually buy medical grade honey to keep in your first aid kit, put on cuts and scrapes. This is not sponsored. I bought this myself and I like to have it on hand if I happen to get a cut or a scrape. This is the brand First Honey Manuka Honey Ointment. So it's Manuka honey that has been irradiated. It's quote unquote medical grade. And the way to use this is when you get a cut or a scrape, you just wash it out with a little dilute soapy water and you put some of this on there. Now, what you're going to notice is that in contrast to petroleum jelly, this is like super sticky. So you're going to want to cover it with a clean dressing, sterile piece of gauze or something to protect that cut and to prevent the honey from, well, making a mess and attracting dust and things that are going to stick to it. You might be intrigued to try honey as a face mask. You could put it on and leave it on for a bit and then rinse it off, or you might get one of those single-use sheet masks that doesn't have any active ingredient in it and apply that on over. You might hang out that way and then rinse it off so you don't have a bunch of sticky residue all over the place. You may find that doing this helps with improving moisture content, luminosity, and potentially helps in calming down skin irritation. And again, it's generally well tolerated. All right, guys, so that's a wrap up with regards to one of the oldest skincare ingredients, products out there, honey. I hope this video was informative and that you enjoyed it. If so, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and as always, don't forget, sunscreen and subscribe. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.